With the big summer blockbuster season coming to a close, the Oscar race is on, and one film that's already started to differentiate itself and pull ahead of the pack is Anora, winning Palme d'Or at this year's Cannes Film Festival and already being talked about as a frontrunner for the Oscars. I had heard that this film was pretty beloved before seeing it, but what I didn't expect is that it would end up being probably the funniest and one of the most charming movies I've seen all year. It's also unexpectedly one of the most vulnerable movies I've seen all year, with a real standout performance from Mikey Madison. Before I go into more detail and break down the film, I should probably let you know that it's a film that's best enjoyed by going in knowing nothing about it. That being said, I'm not going to spoil anything that happens plot-wise that you can't already tell from the trailer, but I will talk about how the overall mood and themes throughout the film change and how it made me feel. So, last chance before I start diving into it. Anora makes me feel like I've been out drinking with friends all night on a bender, thinking that I'm on top of the world and invincible, only to slowly sober up by the time the morning comes around and have to face reality. Looking into a mirror as the morning sun glares through a window and coming to terms with the regretful things I did the night prior and the people I disappointed. I know that analogy probably hit a little bit too close to home for some people, but I can't think of a better way to describe the emotional journey of this film. With most films, the emotional arc looks something kind of like this. We start out with a character having a call to action, encountering roadblock and obstacle after obstacle, but eventually triumphing and finding a resolution. However, with Anora, it's almost flipped upside down on its head. Starting out absolutely exuberant, ramping up to a peak and gradually tapering off until it becomes something entirely different. It might be easiest to break this film down into its three main acts. In the first act, we meet sex worker and stripper Annie Mikiva, real name Anora, who meets rich party boy Vanya Zakharov, son of a wealthy Russian oligarch. The two start a whirlwind romance, ending up getting married until Vanya's family finds out about the marriage and sets out to break it up, separating the two in the second act. And this is until Anora and Vanya are finally reunited in the third act, after having learned much more about what kind of human the other person actually is. Starting with the first act, it's such a whirlwind romance that really vividly captures the feeling of being infatuated and in love with someone, and I was really surprised at how much fun I was having. The cinematography is vibrant, the colors are hyper-saturated and glossy, and it's steeped with youthful energy. It's probably also worth mentioning that this is such a funny film. I don't think I've laughed harder at any screening this year, and with it being very much a smaller, character-driven film with no huge set pieces for actors to hide behind, in many ways the actors are literally and metaphorically naked in the film. So the performances are really carried on the shoulders of its main cast, and everyone delivers here. Mark Edelstein, who plays Vanya, is such a standout for such an off-the-wall, weird yet charming performance. And I'll be talking about Mikey Madison's performance a little bit later on in this review as well. I also appreciate that with all the jokes being thrown around, it never felt like the concept of sex work had become the cheap punchline of the film. I think it takes its subject matter and treats it with nuance and respect. As we continue into the second act, the genre of the film unexpectedly changes into pure slapstick physical comedy as we watch the henchmen employed by Vanya's family try to catch Annie and Vanya and separate the two of them. This was probably the peak of laughter in my theater. People were really having a great time here, which tells me that I might have the unpopular opinion when I say that this was probably my least favorite part of the film. Don't get me wrong, I think the comedy rivals most comedy films I've seen all year, but perhaps it's telling of how much I'd become invested in the character drama and love story by this point in the film, because I started to feel like it was just dragging on and on with no end in sight. At a certain point, I was like, okay, look, I get it. I've seen enough of these goons bumbling around, can we please move on now? I want to see the character journey of our lead cast come to an end. And the whole thing was starting to wear on my patience. And that takes us to the third act, in which we come back down to earth. I won't say much plot-wise about this part, but this is where my initial analogy of the party being over starts to come into play. By the third act, we really get to see Mikey Madison's acting chops. She portrays such a complex character with multiple layers. We get to see her confidently assert her self-worth whenever a character tries to bring her down for her being a sex worker. She'll defiantly throw hands with anyone who dares to bring even an inch of disrespect. but at the same time, we see her more vulnerable sides. A lot of her backstory isn't explicitly given in the film. Hell, we don't even know her real name until the latter half of the movie, but through Mikey Madison's subtle performances, we can see her confident shell occasionally crack and erode, and we see a more vulnerable portrait of a young girl who is forced to grow up too fast, and we see all the defense mechanisms that she has to protect this inner core of someone who wants to be hopeful but can't bring herself to trust other people. As the movie progressed through the third act, the laughter in the theater became less and less prominent, and at a certain point, I think people didn't know what to make of what they were seeing anymore, almost laughing at certain scenes and things that happened that weren't actually even funny anymore. It was almost like the audience was having a plea with the film of something like, hey, come on, we were having such a good time, can we please bring that back? But we can't go back in time. We all have to deal with the consequences of our actions, and every high has to come down. By the end of the film, the theater that had previously erupted in rapturous laughter just kind of silently shifted out wordlessly, feeling somewhat uncomfortable. I would expect that this unconventional way to end a film will definitely throw some people off and leave some people feeling unsatisfied. In my personal opinion though, I think with the themes and what happens plot-wise in the film, this was the right way to end things, unsatisfying as it may be for some. So there you have it, Anora, a movie in 3 parts that became one of my favorite watches of the year. It combined such heartfelt moments with a slowly creeping but inevitable tragedy, and outside of some pacing issues in the second act, I really enjoyed it. I'm giving this film an 8.5 out of 10. If you got the chance to watch this movie, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments, and please subscribe if you want to see more movie reviews like this.